I read an article that stated 70 to 80% of leaders think that they have high performing teams, while only 20 to 30% of the employees on those teams agree. What this tells me is that many leaders are overestimating their team dynamic and possibly their leadership skills. Is your assessment of your team steeped in reality? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalysts, the podcast helping leaders navigate defining moments with wisdom and strategy because how you lead through your crossroads determines the type of leader you become. I'm your host, Shanita Brown. So I am glad that you're here today because we have a really good topic for our executive brief. We're going to be talking about why you do not have a high performing team and what great leaders actually do that can make a difference. We're going to spend the next 20 minutes breaking this down, and you'll have some actions that you can implement to get your team where you want them to be. So let's look at the entire situation. The crossroads is you've recognized that in order to position yourself as someone who can lead effectively, that your team must be a high performing team. And the problem is that, yeah, maybe the team that you have, they keep missing the mark. And you ultimately end up scrambling to try to find solutions because you're not really getting what it is that you need. Well, if you can't demonstrate that you have the ability to lead and build a high performing team, you may find that it's going to be relatively difficult for you to move to the next level. And it's not just you who's going to have this issue. There are many managers and or leaders who are out there who are struggling with this very thing. You're struggling to make strides in your careers and, maybe you've been told that you're not there yet. Well, and speaking of making strides, I'm trying to do the same thing with this podcast. And I know that many of you are like me and have intentions to provide some feedback or even send an email. And you just never get around to it because maybe you're driving in the car and by the time you get where you need to go, well, you've completely forgotten. Well, what I'm asking you to do is just to take a minute, and of course, do not do this while you're driving, but I want you to take a minute and click the link in the show notes for the Crossroads Spotlight. And this is where you can tell me about what you're facing, or you can also leave me some feedback about the show. And it doesn't matter what kind of feedback, even if it has something to do, if you have something to say about the artwork, I want to hear it. I may just share your stories on future episodes. And if you're feeling really ambitious, well, share the episode with someone because what we're trying to do is let others know that they have a resource that is available to them to help them in their journey. So, getting back to the brief, high performing teams, yeah, well, everybody wants one. These are coveted teams, but it's going to take a lot. And what these teams do is they make it easier to compete, across markets. They retain talent, they innovate much faster, and they also create a culture that people actually want to work in. And leaders who cannot build high performing teams, well, ultimately you get stuck managing mediocrity. Plus, high performing teams reflect well on you. They're actually, part of the foundation of your reputation and advancement. So let's get clear about a few things. The root issue is, most leaders make an assumption that their teams will naturally work well together. Well, and this is partly because you probably have some individual team members who are just blowing it out of the water. You wish that you had 10 of them on your team. And what this reminds me of is those different games that HR or team building consultants will use as a part of their team building exercises. And one that I just experienced not long ago was one where there was a group of people, there were some puzzles, and the puzzles were dispensed. Everybody was split up into groups. They were given puzzles. One team was given an actual picture of the puzzle itself, and the other team was not given a picture. And then they were told to put the puzzle together. Well, the focus is what are we actually getting from this scenario? And of course, everybody provides their feedback on what happened. Well, if we had had the picture, it would have been easier. And then, of course, ding, 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 someone says, well, if we had talked to one another and if we had seen the picture, if there were A, B, and C things that we had available, it would have helped us to be more effective and we could have finished this exercise much more quickly. Well, that kind of drives home the point that there are certain things that you have to have in order to work together. It does not happen automatically because you have people who are smart on the team. You're going to have to put in some work. High performing teams are built intentionally. So you must have communication. clear goals, skilled talent, psychological safety. And I know that that term gets used a lot, but it makes sense when you really think about it because if people do not feel comfortable, they're not going to say anything. And so this is why why this is a part of the foundational work of building a high performing team. And ultimately, you also have to have accountability because without accountability, none of the other things are going to matter. So if you have not cultivated these things, then you're derailing any chance of leading a high performing team. And you have to have effective and consistent communication. This is your foundation. Your team is doomed without it. It's doomed. And, if you don't have anything else, it might be lackluster at best. So I'm going to give you some pillars that I think are really important to high performing teams. Pillar number one, psychological safety. As I just mentioned, if people do not feel safe, if they don't think that they can admit to their mistakes, or if they feel like they're going to be punished when they speak up, then you're not really going to get the type of feedback that is going to be actionable for you to guide some of the changes that may need to be taken for your team. And you don't want people to hold back because there's a culture of fear. So you have to rid the team of that. Good people will leave teams if they don't feel safe working on the team. And the way that you can create psychological safety is start by being vulnerable and admit your own mistakes. If you want your team to demonstrate a thing, you have to be willing to demonstrate that thing for them and show them that you are there in the thick of it with them. Another thing that you can do is you can ask for their input and you can take it seriously. You do not want to ask for their input and then be dismissive about it or put it on the proverbial table it and come back to it. All you've done is send the message that it doesn't matter and you don't want to do that. So model vulnerability, take their feedback seriously. Pillar number two, clear expectations and goals. I cannot reiterate this enough. Everyone has to know what success looks like and how their work contributes to the team's goal, period. And what that's going to look like is you're going to have to explain the why behind the goals. You're going to have to define what the team goals are, and you want to include them in that process. Because if you are ambiguous about what the goals are, all you're going to have is a lot of wasted effort. And there's definitely not going to be any alignment between the work that is being done and the goals that you're trying to achieve. Pillar number three, you have to have timely and specific feedback. Regular feedback on what's working and what needs to be changed. This is what's going to help you to develop a high performing team. And while you're going through the exercise of getting this feedback, either getting it or giving it, you're going to start to see a change because your team will begin to earn some respect for you because not only are you offering them something that is helpful, they're offering you something that is helpful and valuable and they're seeing that you're implementing it. So as you go through the timely and specific feedback process, we're calling this closing the loop. This is the terminology that I used to hear regularly in one of my earlier roles, where you start something, you check on it in the meantime, and then you come back to make sure that hey, everything is tied up and we're done and we're ready to move on to the next thing. People are not going to be able to improve what they don't know needs improvement. So this is why it's important to do that. So the way that you're going to be able to create this timely feedback cycle is you're going to set a regular cadence to do this. You're not going to wait until the performance reviews. And you're going to want to use the SBI framework, which is the situation, behavior, and impact. And I spoke a little bit more about this in an earlier episode. That episode is called Why Your Feedback Keeps Getting Ignored. And I will leave a link for that in the show notes. And you can also sign up for the Catalyst and it'll be delivered to you automatically on a weekly basis. Pillar number four, trust and autonomy are a must. You can only have this if you have skilled talent. So you don't want to just go nilly willy and automatically give trust. And by that, I mean you just automatically know and understand and trust what they do, and you give them the authority to make decisions. You have to understand the team dynamic. Are they in the right place? Is the work that they're doing, is it relevant to their skill set? Is it above? Is it below? Or is it a right fit? And you want to be able to trust your team and provide them autonomy because you don't want to micromanage. If you have to micromanage your team, either you don't believe that they can actually do the work that you hired them to do, or you're very tightly wound and you're causing yourself a lot of issues because you don't think that anyone can do the work, which is simply not true. And that's a whole other episode that we could probably get into. So you definitely want to demonstrate to your team that you trust their judgment. And so, what you can do to create an environment for that is you can give the people on your team the resources and the authority that they need to move forward because you don't want to be the reason why something gets delayed because they had to wait to ask you. Give them examples on the kinds of things that you would trust them to do because you don't want them to come to you and have to ask, well, what about this particular task? What about that particular task? Work through it with your team. This is a part of that effective communication and understanding what exactly it is that needs to be done. Pillar number 5, accountability. And remember, accountability is not a negative thing, it's a positive thing. And we want to say accountability is not blame. This is merely taking ownership of your contributions, okay? Everyone has to own their contributions. And if there is a situation where something failed, we just simply use that as a learning opportunity. I have worked in the healthcare industry for about 20 years or so. And when you see something in the healthcare system that has failed, specifically when it comes to patient health or some type of procedure, you want to do a root cause analysis to find out, well, what happened and how could we have prevented that? Well, that's what it's a learning opportunity. That's what how you want to see that. That's all that it is. And the reason why it matters is because if you do not have accountability, you're going to be left with mediocrity. And I know that as a listener to this show, mediocrity is not on your list of things that you want. So how are you going to create an environment like that where you're going to address performance issues directly and fairly? And you're going to hold yourself accountable first. It is not going to work if you never own what you do or don't do. Okay? Critical questions that you have to ask yourself. Do people feel safe speaking up on my team or do they stay silent? And if they remain silent like they're under arrest, well, then you know you have a really big problem. Are you giving feedback on a regular basis or are you only waiting until performance review time? Think about that. Do not rob people of an opportunity to better themselves at their work. Because again, my philosophy is people show up to do a good job. Unless they show me otherwise, I believe that they came to do good work. And then, how much autonomy do your people actually have? Or are you micromanaging everything that they do? I can tell you right now, you do not have time to micromanage your team. So think through those questions. Now we're going to transition to the choices that we have. And generally, you know that I give you three. So the first one is this. Well, you can just hope that they figure it out. Hmm. Well, let me tell you, if you're just sitting and hoping that they figure it out, you are in trouble and so is your team. It's going to appear as if it's not going to require you much effort, but it is going to require a lot of effort because there's going to be some cleanup that has to take place. And not only that, think about the emotional and mental toll that that takes on yourself and your team because they're in a state of confusion. They may even be resentful or bitter because you've basically disengaged. And let me tell you, this does not put you high on the list if there are leaders who are watching you because they're not going to be asking your insight on how to build teams or how to get them to be at a level where they're performing at their best because you're not even demonstrating it with your own team. So don't stick yourself with a mediocre team. Choice B, you can control everything. Well, this goes back to the micromanaging, which is definitely not optimal. It's going to feel like you're managing all the risks and that you're able to mitigate all these things. The problem is that you've stuck yourself into all of the work rather than trusting your team to do so. You have completely gutted them of any autonomy that they have. And therefore, what they're going to do is they're going to disengage. So, what you want to do is just leave that to the rookies because rookies make those moves. You're trying to transition out of that. You want to get the full potential from your team. So then, choice C, build intentionally using the pillars that I just mentioned. And what this does is it's going to create the environment for you to have a high performing team because your team is going to start to see a difference between the you of today and the you of yesterday. It is going to require some initial investment of time and attention because you're going to have to work really closely with your team. You're going to have to listen to some things, and maybe some of the things that they share with you are not going to be pleasant, but you have to be vulnerable sometimes to learn. So be open to what that brings. And this is really the only approach that's going to be effective. And it's going to work in the long term, but you're going to have to lay the foundation for it. So then how do we build high performing teams? Okay, well, here's a strategy, and I'm going to give you several. You're going to establish some team norms. Part of that means you're creating the psychological safety and you're talking about it. You're going to agree, well, what does it look like for us to have some communication standards? And what are those standards? How do we communicate with our leader? How do we communicate with each other? You want to define what those things look like. And when it comes to conflict and mistakes, talk about that with your team to say that this is how we're going to handle all of these things as they arise because they will come. You want to develop a plan as to how you will address those. So the action that you're going to take is when you have another team meeting, if you have one that's coming up pretty soon, we'll have a conversation about what your team should value and what those norms should look like. Strategy number 2, over communicate the goals and the expectations. You have to talk about the goals more than once, and you have to talk about the expectations more than once. Write them down so that everyone understands them and make sure that the individual team members understand what their role is on the team. Discuss them in your one on ones, reference them regularly, and make sure that you leave some flexibility to adjust them. Okay, it does not have to be set in stone as you're trying to work through the process. So this week, make sure that all of your team members can articulate the top 3 team goals. Strategy number 3, you want to implement regular feedback cycles. This could be weekly, bi weekly, monthly, or it could even be a combination of those. But you want to set the precedent that you are taking this seriously and that you mean business. So, the way that you want to do this is again, use the SBI framework from the episode that I mentioned to you earlier, how to give feedback that actually changes behavior. And then make sure that you give the feedback. Do not wait until the annual performance and do not blow over it as if it's not that important. Again, you want to help to feed into the development of your team members. And so for your next team meeting or even your one on one, talk about these things. Strategy number 4, you want to grant real autonomy. And what this looks like is going to be different, maybe for each of your team members, because they might be in different stages of their career. Maybe you have some more entry level type employees, and maybe you have some more senior level employees. They may not be able to handle the level of authority that each of those roles requires. So, work with your team to define what that looks like and give them examples as to what you would expect for them to do in certain situations, and make sure that you're only stepping in when necessary because nobody wants to feel like, okay, I'm not trusted now. My boss told me that I could do this, but when I did that, they second guessed everything that I did. You don't want to be that person. So identify 3 decisions that your team members can make without your approval and share that with them. Have a conversation about it. Number 5, build accountability. Again, not blame. You want to make sure to address any performance issues promptly. The longer you wait, the worse it will be to have the conversation. Use behavioral language and not character attacks. You want to make sure that you acknowledge and celebrate accountability. This is a good thing. And so the action that you'll take is if there's any accountability issue on your team, you want to address it. You want to address it swiftly and you want to be fair about it. And then finally, strategy number 6, make sure that you invest in the relationships. All of these things are going to require you to be engaged with your team. If you tend to be more introverted and you're very quiet, you're going to have to step outside of that in order to lead your team and do it in a meaningful way. They want to have some level of connection. I'm not saying that you have to be best friends, but what I am saying is that it's going to be helpful for you to actually get to know your team members. Ask their spouse's name, ask, do they have pets? You could make it as silly or as fun as you need it to be, but develop the rapport with your team because that's what's also going to help you to build trust. So for the next 30 days, you're going to work on building your team. You're going to talk about the things that we just discussed. So week number 1, establish those team norms and make sure that everyone understands we are going to have some psychological safety within our group. Week number 2, make sure that you clarify the goals and the expectations and do that regularly. Week number 3, implement regular feedback. Please, this is what's going to help you. And make sure that your team recognizes that they have the ability to make decisions and they don't always have to come to you to get authorization to do something. Week number 4, make sure that you address accountability issues and definitely celebrate progress. It is a good feeling to be in a meeting and have your boss mention something that you did that was extremely helpful or something that you advanced in. Do that for your team. They will love it because people need that encouragement. How will you know that you've had some success? Well, your team members will feel psychologically safe. They will feel, not only will they feel it, you'll see a demonstration of that feeling because they will actually be sharing information in meetings and in one on ones. Uh, if your team can articulate what the team goals are, then you know that you've been successful. And you should see that projects and tasks, they move much more quickly because your team is collaborating more with one another. And that's what's going to help you to understand and see that the work that you have been doing, the investment that you have made in building a high performing team, that it is working. So the bottom line is this: high performing teams, they are not built solely on talent. You have to have these things. You have to have the psychological safety, the clear expectations, the timely feedback. You have to have these things. And leaders who create these conditions, they're the ones who build teams that deliver exceptional results, which is what you're going for. And what is the risk? Well, it's definitely high because this is what's going to impact your career trajectory as well as your reputation. It does matter. So the decision timeline is this week. You want to be in the process of starting this work. So start with the baseline. Make sure that your team knows that they can share their thoughts about work and leave the door open for them to provide those solutions because you don't want just venting sessions. And next week, we're going to be talking about why avoiding change is a problem. And I know nobody really likes change, but how you deal with it can really mean the difference between growth and stagnation. And so we have to deal with it. And if you want to be ready to move to the next level of your career, well, then show the kind of leader you are and take some action. Your team will perform at the level of the conditions that you create. So if you shut everything down, well, they're going to follow suit and you're not going to be pleased. So make the difference. Start to invest in those conditions and watch what becomes possible. And then finally, I want you to click the Catalyst link in the show notes. And what you're going to receive the episodes delivered directly to your email. And you're also going to receive some curated insights to help you lead. So until next time, be thoughtful, be wise, and be strategic. And remember, crossroads reveal who you are, catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters, so make it count. I'll see you next week for your next executive brief.